Hello, good afternoon, good evening, and good morning. I am Richard Watkins, your host of the Richard Watkins Podcast. Super excited to be with you all today. We are in our new digs, our new little podcast space. It should be a lot of fun. We're still decorating the place, but I've got two of my flags up, my UNC flag. I went to graduate school here, and my Fayetteville State University flag where I went to undergrad. So super excited. We're going to decorate this place so we can have a much better podcast experience. We're going to do something a little bit different today. We've got a great guest lined up for you next week. Eric from the Moorhead Planetarium and Science Center is going to come and talk to us about community engagement and community outreach in regards to scientific efforts. Um, and I always think that's important. There have been a handful of episodes where I get on here and we just talk about how things are changing all around us. And that is very true. I give talks all the time, I talk to people all the time, and increasingly so, folks are just absolutely just awestruck, gobsmacked, um, about just how quickly things are moving around them. And it's very hard, to really make decisions. So I really want to touch on a really, really cool topic. It's old, but giving, kind of what we're going through today, I kind of want to bring it up. And maybe we'll have, somebody on talking about this. But before we go any further, I'd like to give a huge shout out to the folks who make this podcast possible, the Science Policy Action Network, or SPAN, the leader in scientific innovation, education, health, consulting, bridging the gap between innovation and societal advancement. So, no matter what field you're in, no matter what sector, whether it's the private sector, public sector, government sector, if you have questions or you want to take advantage of opportunities regarding innovation, regarding health, regarding education, please look no further than the Science Policy Action Network. You can find more information about the Science Policy Action Network at www.span-inc.org. Again, that is span-inc.org. Right, so let's get right into it. When we talk about, take a sip of coffee on this one, all right? Just get myself ready for this kind of conversation. All right, here we go. Mm. Oh, that's good. Good, good, good. For all you coffee drinkers out there, there's nothing better than a sip of a freshly poured cup of coffee. When we are talking about, the times that we're in, right? We have to recognize something that I've said before, and I know to many of you is becoming increasingly apparent that the amount of impact that innovation has on our lives, our day to day lives, will drastically increase over the next 10 years. Every week, a new innovation will come online that changes our lives in many ways that, in the immediacy, are undetectable to us. So that's one thing. But another thing is, given the rapid change of the world around us, making decisions, whether it's family, whether it's education, whether it's even entrepreneurship, is incredibly difficult. But what makes it even more difficult is an element discussed by who discussed this. This is a really great thing about the world that we're in right now. I can do a podcast and then pull up information, while I speak. Give me a second because this is just really, really good. So The psychologist that talked about this, and my background is in psychology for undergrad. I have a Bachelor of Science in Psychology, and I've always just felt that it is just incredibly fascinating to really understand how people think, and how they behave and how they come to decisions. It is something that I've always found absolutely fascinating, right? How I tick, I look at myself in the mirror. Obviously, I try to figure myself out, which is very difficult, but also those around me, and not just the people in my immediate vicinity, but society as a whole. Um, Oftentimes decision making and why people do what they do is incredibly difficult to understand and appreciate. But a psychologist named Dr. Dan Gilbert, I believe, gave a TED talk about a decade ago. And one of the phrases, or one of the terms that I believe he coined, somebody check me on that, is a concept known as the end of history illusion. Now, basically, what it says is that people have a difficult time appreciating how much change they will experience over time. It turns out, mm, not most people, it turns out everyone just, it seems as a consequence of being a human, has very poor ability of understanding and appreciating how much change will occur over time. Now, Dr. Dan Gilbert described an experiment where he collected data. Um, it was the best way, I imagine, that he was able to do a longitudinal analysis of what he was talking about. But he asked people questions about their values that they feel like they'll have over the next 10 years. And they asked other people the values that they've had over the past 10 years. And what they were able to discover is that people could appreciate and respect where they came from and appreciate all of the changes that have occurred throughout their lives to get them to the point that they are at now. But they have a very difficult time appreciating how that same change that they've already experienced, how that change will continue in their life. And what that ultimately means is that we have ingrained in us, due to this illusion, and many people have written about it since. And again, I encourage you to check it out. It's called the end of history illusion. It's a psychological, theory. People fail to just really like appreciate that impact, and that failure makes it very difficult to make decisions that benefit our future self. Now, we oftentimes look back and regret past decisions, but quite often it is the case that our future selves have to pay for the bad decisions of our past selves. And that comes from our ability to rely on memory and our inability to harness imagination. Right? I'm going to say that again, and please check out Dr. Gilbert's talk. I'm going to say that one more time. People are better able to kind of harness memories, right? Obviously, it was something that they experienced, it's something that but they are not very good at imagination. And I think that brings with it a lot of problems, a lot of difficulties. I think, as any scientist, I think the most valuable tool for any scientist is imagination. So that's really, really important. And that lack of imagination makes it very, very difficult to make appropriate decisions, right? Like that go into the future, right? It's funny, during the presentation, he makes a mention, he says, when you hear folks say, I can't imagine something, he says it's more of a comment, a testament to their lack of imagination rather than the likelihood of an event occurring, right? So if you hear somebody talk about anything in the future, it is oftentimes shaped more often than not by the limitations of their own imagination rather than what will actually occur. And that is huge. That is huge. That is absolutely huge, right? We see this at play all the time, right? And I am going to begin to kind of stretch this kind of concept of the end of history illusion, perhaps beyond its borders, and it may be in ways that are inappropriate and it wasn't intended, right, within the research, right? But I would have to imagine that if this is on a single individual psychological level, that will then impact like the sociological thinking, right? The societal thinking, right? This inability to imagine, this inability to properly think about the future puts us in a very difficult situation. More often, it puts our children at a very difficult, position, right? Where they have to answer the bad decisions of their parents, right? And for society, generations that come after us will look upon the decisions that we made, um, with confusion, maybe disgust, and it is because of this lack of imagination. And quite honestly, we don't necessarily um, live in a culture that rewards imagination. I've said this plenty of times. Our educational system, especially in regards to science, is based off of memorization and regurgitation. Almost everything that we really value is kind of based off of that. The imaginative piece is really the most difficult, right? So I've got the Wikipedia page opened up for the end of history illusion, and I just want to kind of read, you know, how it's worded on here. Now, obviously, it's a manuscript that is published in a peer-reviewed article where they describe the materials and methods, and Wikipedia is just a summary. The public can contribute to it, and at the end, obviously, they provide references and stuff. So, just check it out when you get a chance. But it says the end of history illusion is a psychological illusion in which individuals, right, individuals of all ages, it doesn't matter your age, that's an important thing, right? Of all ages, right? Believe that they have experienced significant personal growth and changes in tastes up to the present moment, right? Up to the present, people feel that they are a finished product. When I'm talking to you right now, and you're listening to this right now, more often than not, it is likely that you feel that you are a finished product, that you are the right version of yourself, right? And that you will not experience any more changes again. You'll find out that your future self will have to pay the price of your past self. Because all the time, diet, exercise, it's finances, it's all the time, right? Face to the present moment, but will not substantially grow or mature in the future, despite recognizing that their perceptions have evolved. So they recognize, not they, we recognize that we have changed, but we underestimate how much we will continue to change. And that is everybody. So if you are listening to this, then I'm talking to you. And that innate quality of you, of me, makes us bad decision makers, right? Makes us bad decision makers. The better able we are able to appreciate what the future may bring, which will require us to harness imagination, the better able we will make decisions that our future self will be more able to handle. Now, it goes on to say that the illusion is based on the fact that at any given developmental stage, an individual can observe a relatively low level of maturity in a previous stage. The phenomenon affects teenagers, middle-aged individuals, and seniors. In general, people tend to see significant changes only in hindsight. Hindsight. Remember, hindsight is 2020, right? We can't really look forward or imagine forward. We rely and we over rely on our stores of experience. You hear all the time, right? We need somebody with experience, right? We hear all the time that in a village, the elders are a library, right? We celebrate the acquisition of knowledge, right? The pooling of an understanding within an individual based off of their experiences and their studies, right? It's what they know and what they can recall. But we don't have that same appreciation for an individual imagining into the future. We just don't. We just don't. And that is just part of the human experience that, if appreciated, will better enable us to look into the future. All right, going on. Where we at? 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 All right. Changes in hindsight, right? But fail to predict that these changes will continue. For example, a 20-year-old's prediction of how great a change they will undergo in the next 10 years will not be as extreme as a 30-year-old's recollection of the changes that they underwent between the ages of 20 and 30. And it goes on to say the same phenomenon is true for people of any age. Collectively, individually, we lack imagination, and we don't put forth the energy and effort to imagine a future. We underestimate how much things will change. And we make decisions in the present that have rippling consequences that reach far into the future. Well, that's huge. That's huge when you're considering conversations about what impact, say, a technology like artificial intelligence will have. People base their feelings on the impact that a technology like AI will have on what they've already experienced. I think one of the things, and forgive me if this doesn't come out right because I'm saying it for the first time, but in a lot of cases, and we don't fully appreciate this, but I believe we're starting to appreciate it. When dealing with something new, with something novel, with thinking about the future, experience will often mislead you. And that's tough. That is really tough, right? That is really tough when you're thinking about, all right, what impact will AI have on society, will have on me? We try to understand that through the lens of what we've already experienced. And the problem is we've never experienced a lot of this stuff, and we underestimate the impact. We underestimate the change in the direction of the change. Everything we underestimate it, and that is of particular concern because we hear all the time, we need to put safeguards and we need to really understand the technology. We need to have a conversation regardless of whether it's AI, society, any type of technology, health. There's always this kind of thing where it's like, we need to stop and have a conversation about this. When people have a conversation about it, you very quickly realize that they're not harnessing properly their imagination. More often than not, you'll hear things like, "We've been through situations like this before," right? We've gotten through this, but we'll get through it again, right? And those are miscalculations. They might sometimes turn out to be accurate, but they are gross miscalculations. Span is always really kind of focused on this kind of nexus between innovation and society. And so we're always thinking forward. We're always trying to imagine, what society will look like, what the impact will be, what we'll need to do. And it's a task that will keep you busy all the time, right? Um, but it's just absolutely fascinating to really kind of appreciate that element of us, right? And it's also a huge reason to, that's one of the big things I really like psychology, right? Is really helps you just really understand yourself, really helps you understand others, and through a better understanding of yourself and others, it makes for a better life. Just understanding the world around us is just really, really critical. But yeah, the end of history illusion. And you know, again, you can think of this in so many different like situations, right? You think about how collectively we view issues such as the climate crisis, right? You see how we look at issues such as the pandemic. For example, there's a general sense that we've made it through the pandemic. Now we can focus on, other issues, right? Forgetting that throughout our history, we've continuously experienced pandemics, right? Whether it's influenza, whether it's Yersinia pestis, whether it's obviously, SARS-CoV-2. And we've experienced these, Ebola, West Nile, we've experienced this, but collectively, when we emerge through a situation and then we start thinking forward, we really fail to appreciate that these situations will come back and that we'll have to deal with that, right? So, again, looking into the future. So, in the case of the climate crisis, it's really because people just are in the present, in the past, rarely are they in the future, right? And so when dealing with the climate crisis and trying to put together decisions that will impact the future, we often fall short of that, right? We undervalue the experiences that will happen in the future. Again, great mistake. It makes us make bad decisions. Like when you make a decision, it's a projection into the future. So that's one thing. When we talk about the pandemic, even though we have so many past experiences throughout the course of human history, we still kind of fail to appreciate that pandemic will come around again, right? Maybe next time it'll be worse. Who knows? But collectively, we kind of get past that. When we talk about a situation, obviously, we talked about AI before. We talk about situations as far as our own personal health, right? We oftentimes fail to really appreciate how our actions in the present, obviously, will affect us in the future. I just think that's just absolutely fascinating, right? So it's important to hold some of these concepts in your head when you are making decisions, right? The better you are, or the more knowledgeable you are of yourself, the world around you, the better off you'll be. And that is why we're here at the Richard Watkins Podcast to bring to you on a weekly basis ideas, concepts, discoveries, conversations, whether it's about innovation, whether it's about institutions, health, or education. We are going to bring these topics to you with the hope that when you listen to them, you'll understand more about the world around you, more about yourself. And in the case of the end of history illusion, you'll begin to think more about the future, which will put you in a better position to make great decisions. And perhaps the best decision that you can possibly make is to check out the Science Policy Action Network at span-inc.org. What a perfect segue into a plug. But once again, this has been the Richard Watkins Podcast. I am your host, Richard Watkins. Wait, I was about to close out. I want to say one more thing when talking about AI. I just got to go back and say this again, and I'm going to do a proper closeout here in a second. This AI thing is just absolutely fascinating. All right, here's one. Have we created life? That's a tough one, right? That's an AI question. And I don't have an answer. You just figure it out on your own. Have we created consciousness, right? Have we created something that is sentient, that can think? Eh, Have we put ourselves as humans, right? Because oftentimes, well, actually almost all the time, we are always thinking of ourselves at competition with other humans, which is very true. But are we now at competition with our own creation, with technology? That's an interesting question. I think we are. Also, I'm sorry, the huge societal transition that will occur and is already occurring is a huge piece. Um, Now, on one hand, if you were to really harness your imagination, what we hear is this will have grave consequences for the human experience as we know it. And I'm underselling it right now because I don't want to be like an alarmist or anything like that. So I'm just saying it as kind of like conservatively as possible. But on the other hand, we also lack an imagination on any of the positive impacts that it'll change in our life. And I just don't know what they'll be yet. It's impossible to really appreciate. But when you allow your imagination to roam, you really start to really kind of think like, okay, this is going to change everything as we have ever known it. Absolutely everything as we've ever known it. Will we notice it while it's happening? Sometimes change just overtakes us and we don't even really appreciate when it's happening. Like the transition to, this kind of virtual meetings, right? They just came and we just accepted it like it's always happened. I don't know what will happen with artificial intelligence. Will we not have any more needs anymore, right? Will we be able to take care of, everyone? Or will it further exacerbate the chasm between the haves and the have-nots, right? And not only extending the gap between the haves and the have-not, but making the number of people within the have group smaller and smaller, and the number of people within the have-not group larger and larger. And how is the have group going to then look at the have-not group? I have no idea. I have no idea. And I hear a lot of people kind of making overconfident statements. And I think it has a lot to do with the end of history illusion, imagining or making statements about the future based off your past experiences. Again, the end of history illusion. Listen, I won't keep you guys any longer. As always, it's been an absolute pleasure, privilege to be with you all today. Remember, the future is not something to wait for. It is something to build, to go out there and get smarter. This is the Richard Watkins Podcast. I am your humble host, Richard Watkins. Thank you for joining with us. We'll be right back out with another episode. Again, check us out and be sure to check out our other episodes on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Everyone, have a great day. Take care.